All right, Mike Brown,
Well, all right.
here we are. Um, I see you brought a book here,
I
the
did.
the Magic of Thinking Big.
Yeah.
Why did you bring that book?
Well, growing up, I really didn't read things that were of personal growth ever. I typically just kind of did what I had to do to get life going in the information that I had. So, The Magic of Thinking Big is one of the first books I had ever read on leadership and personal development. And I noticed that uh, just by simply controlling my mindset, I can get further in life at any level that I wanted to. So this was the first book I read, and it helped and changed my life completely because a mentor recommended it to me. I was in search of a mentor, and when I found a good one, he ended up recommending this book, and I think that you should read it too.
I've read that book. I have that book.
Right,
That is an amazing book.
right, right.
It's kind of funny. So I was telling you about I'm doing this Mace course. So I'm getting pretty deep into like the Mace community and the Mace world,
Hmm.
and I've been asked this question. There's been this question that's been posed: did you find the Mace, or did the Mace find you? So ultimately, going back to energy, right? The energy you put out being returned to you, right? And sometimes things cross your path. Without you intentionally, looking for those things, but they find you, right?
Right.
Um, and I feel like that book was one of those things for me. I actually had an old boss. She was a director, probably like one of the nicest ladies. She was a fantastic marketer.
Hmm.
She actually gave me. I have it next to my bedside, like a little. It was like during Christmas, so she gave the team gifts, and she gave us one that said it says "Think Big," and it's like it looks like a little, it's a little painting, a little portrait. And then a guy that I follow heavily, Andy Frisella, that
Okay.
I was telling you about. He's
Right.
based here in St. Louis. So for you and for the folks listening, so Andy Frisella, he has a podcast called the MFCEO Project. One of the best. I think it's actually ranked number one on iTunes right now. The
Okay.
best podcast in the world, business, self development. He's based here in St. Louis. Um, in 2009, so 2008 is when I began like my journey like in the fitness world as far as like professionally. I got a job as a trainer working at 24 Hour Fitness, and then the next year in 2009 I started working at Supplement Superstores,
Okay.
which is a big chain here in the Midwest, St. Louis. They've expanded out. And Andy Frisella and his partner, they own that company, and they also own First Form, which is a large supplement company, and they're based here in St. Louis.
Right.
So long story short, he's built this huge empire, multi-million dollars in sales
Hmm.
every year, like hundreds of millions of dollars in sales. Like he's killing it. He has this fantastic podcast, and I follow him, and it's funny. Well, I'm gonna back up for half a second because it's funny. Like whenever I started working at Southern Superstore in 2009, Andy was still doing the interviews. He was still interviewing everybody himself and making those decisions. Fast forward to today, like he doesn't have to work if he doesn't ever want to. I don't think he does any interviews. So it's just
Sure.
like it's crazy to see this huge process because as we were talking off mic, um, just seeing where you want, like just believing and just like if you put in the work, you'll get there.
Right.
And that's a lot of what he's preaching. But anyway, my point is, I was following him, and he was using Periscope a lot at the time.
Hmm.
But he had like a contest or something, and he gave whoever did whatever he sent that book out to them.
Right.
So he sent that book. So that's how I got the book. Is my point, and I
Right.
read the
Right.
book. It's a fantastic fucking book.
Hmm.
But I think the magic of thinking big, and I'll let you explain it further.
Right.
But I think it ties directly into like the law of attraction
Mhm.
and just the energy and just the different things we were talking about prior.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm with it. The story behind me even having this book with me is quite an interesting one. It starts, I was born in Jacksonville, Florida, 1983. Go 1980s babies. I was born in 83, Jacksonville, Florida. And I lived with my grandmother majority of my life because my dad was a hardworking guy, right? Super hardworking, doing his own IT thing. Sometimes he did some off-site projects and such, but I grew up in Florida with my dad as a single dad and my grandmother, raising me. And they wanted to make sure that I was in a better environment each year after year. I was the only kid, right? And so I was a bad kid, though. I was like,
Bad in what way?
um, I was doing some bad stuff at 5 years old, for example, like burning down like curtains and such, just being a bad little pyro or whatever it was.
Oh, shit.
I was a bad kid, man. Like,
Yeah. So your dad was working all the time, and then your grandmother raised you.
right, for the most part, because he would, have to have me stay there as as he's at work. So,
Yeah. Where's your mom?
they had gotten a divorce prior to me, being born. So my dad got actual, custody of me, which was great.
Oh, yeah.
But at the time, I didn't really know the situation. I just knew my dad, right?
Yeah.
And so I would see my mom here and there, and I'd obviously be with my grandmother and such. But each year of growing up, they wanted to make sure that I was in a better and better environment, right? We didn't grow up in the best of situations. I didn't grow up in the best situations in Jacksonville. It was rough. It was rough and tough. But what my dad recognized was that he was going to at least do his best to get not only himself but me into a much better broad environment in life. And I didn't really appreciate it back then because as a kid, man, as a kid, I knew everything, right? Like,
Yeah, you don't have that perspective.
right. You don't have no perspective. I didn't have any. All I wanted to do was get in trouble, have fun.
Very ego-driven.
Big time, big time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I had no idea what my dad was doing, but he was always there for me no matter how much trouble I ended up having myself get into, right? And so, but at 17, I was living in Springfield, Missouri. So I lived in Jacksonville, Florida, moved into, fast forward a couple years, right? My dad and I, we moved to the St. Louis area. And everything changed from there because I met the right people and I got in a totally different environment. And so here's where I'm going with the most of this. I got this book because when I moved to St. Louis in 2007, I think it was. Yep. 2006, 2007.
How old were you at this time?
I was 22.
Okay, and you moved to St. Louis from Springfield.
So we're gonna do the whole lineage. Okay. Jacksonville, Florida, until I was 13.
Yeah.
And then from Jacksonville to Atlanta, Georgia, until I was about 17.
Oh, okay.
And then moved to Springfield, Missouri. Actually, it was right around 16. I was going to turn 17. So I moved to Springfield at 16. Ended up going to high school there. Here's why we were moving around so much. My dad, like I said, wanted to make sure I was in the right situation every year. I went to 10 different schools.
Oh, fuck.
10 different schools, bro.
Dude.
But it's because my father was always focused on getting to the next step. And long story short, I ended up here at 16 or Springfield, Missouri at 16.
Yep, here at 22.
Right. And so actually ended up going to high school there, finishing up, dropped out of high school.
Yeah.
Essentially, I guess where I'm going with all of this is that all that moving around that was happening was for a reason. And I'm searching for the reason of every life lesson a lot, So, man, it's a long story, but I'm trying to figure out which route to take this.
No, that's totally fine, and I may derail you. So you said something, and I just want to think about this. So, does there have to be a reason? A lesson, yes, but a reason? Sometimes I feel like some things just happen for no reason. Like they just happen just because things just happen. Now, not to say that we can't find a lesson in that, but is there necessarily a reason that it happened?
Maybe.
I don't know. You just said that. It triggered that thought.
Yeah. Is there a reason? I think
know.
that there, for me and my own being, I think that there is. Because going from where I was living in Jacksonville to moving to Springfield at 16, in that time frame, all I thought about was what the television told me who I was.
Yeah.
And, BET said, well, you're this, and then you're that. And so I tried to mimic that lifestyle. and ended up getting into a lot of trouble, in and out of jail, so on and so forth, because I was trying to live up to the information I was feeding myself as a kid. Um, I was just nonstop commercials playing in my head, just like us adults, right? But up until about when I moved to Springfield, I ended up meeting a different group of people, because I went from prior to 16, being in an all, African American school, to now flip all to a Caucasian European school, was crazy. I was one of only 6 darker complexion people in the entire high school. One of only 6.
Wow, that's not very many.
Compared to where I was before, where it was actually the reverse.
Yeah.
All my life.
Yeah, that's probably a
And
huge
so
culture shock.
it was a huge culture shock, but I met a totally different group of guys that I otherwise wouldn't have met, because I was in my situation back in Florida, or in Atlanta, and everything changed from there. They started to talk about different things, not what the television was telling them, but thinking for themselves. I didn't discover I was really how to think for myself until I moved to Missouri, actually. So I owe a lot of my whatever success I have now to moving to this state specifically. I'll always have a home here for sure. And everything changed because you meet people who have read some things and who have treaded down some successes in life, and you want to emulate some of their results. And so I finally found a mentor when I moved here to St. Louis, after I dropped out of high school. Got here at 22. I finally found a different group of people that will help me advance in life and my thinking. And so I think that I brought this book to shed a little bit of light of how powerful our minds are. It's one of many books, but I always take that with me everywhere I go, because it was the beginning of my journey. You got to think outside your circumstances, because you never know what's around the corner. And for me, when I was 16, living in Springfield, I still started to get in trouble. I mean, there was a different group of guys, like I said, but I was still getting in trouble because I had a lot of residual effect of the information that I had known up to that point. And so I ended up getting kicked out of my house, right, at 17, because I dropped out anyways. Like, he's like, well, what are you going to be here for then? You dropped out.
So how old were you when you dropped out? Were you 16?
About 17, because I was only at that school for about a year and a half.
Okay.
So at 17, I was pretty much done. But one of my good friends said, you know what? Well, you're kicked out. I'll have a place for you to, live. And so that was fantastic. I had a way of finding good people, but I was still in and out of jail because of the information I had to that point. I still was living that life.
How many times did you go to jail?
Probably close to 25 times, somewhere along there.
Really?
Yeah, a lot.
Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, it was just little small situations, just maybe being booked or not booked, or being because I was hanging out with a lot of the rough crowd too.
Yeah.
So that was from 17 until about 21. And what happened at the age of 21 is I went to a party in Branson, Missouri. And at that party, there was a bunch of people there. A buddy of mine who was top salesman for a hotel chain had a free resort style room for us all. It's like 40 of us in there, right? And at that party, there was a person there who got my information, got my phone number, and she handed my phone number over to my sister and gave my phone number again to my dad. I had already been moved out. I was kicked out. I was living from hotel to hotel, house to house. From 17 to 21, I was doing that. I was living on my own. I was doing that. Okay? And
it's
so
vagabonding.
Right. I was trying to figure it out, man.
Yeah.
17 and 21, I was just a street MBA, they would call it, right? In the streets. But I hadn't really been talking with my dad between 17 or 18 to 21 at all. Like, my parents, nope. No point, because total different mindsets and lifestyles. And so my dad got my number because of the girl at the party gave my number to my sister, which then gave it to my dad. My dad calls me and says, hey, I don't know what you're doing in life. We haven't talked in years, but I'm moving to St. Louis because he was still living in Springfield, so was I, just different parts of Springfield. He said, I'm moving to St. Louis. I don't know what you're doing in your life, but I'm moving in about a month to St. Louis. I would love for you to come with us. And then boom, I said, yeah, I'll do that because I'm living from place to place.
Dude, that's dope.
Yeah, so at 21, I ended up moving here. And that was our 21, 22. And here I am, 35.
I think so. We were talking about energy, and we're talking about just kind of things, just like the universe, just kind of putting things in your path.
Right.
Like, what made your dad reach out to you? Have you asked him?
Well, I'm sure that my sister told him I was living in squalor. And so he's always just such a giving hand and always have been. But me being a snot-nosed, know-nothing kid, I didn't really respect a lot of his judgment.
Shit.
But he ended up calling me because he probably knew where I was at and where I was headed.
Yeah.
And me, I was down to do anything to change, right? And so I moved here to St. Louis. That's crazy.
Yeah. So you were very impressionable kind of growing up, would you say?
Maybe because I went to so many different schools.
Right.
And so I met a whole gamut of people in life.
Right.
A lot of people.
Right.
Some people say, man, you went to that many schools. It's unfortunate. I was like, no, actually, I have no regrets. I thought it was pretty cool. I got to see all different types of people and I got to learn from a lot of different folks.
Yeah.
And so my dad knew that I was probably just not in a good situation. So I said, you know what, I'll move. I'll do it. And so in under a month, I packed my cell phone and my shoes and said, all right, I'm moving in. And I moved to St. Peters, Missouri with him.
Oh, wow.
Ended up working at the Olive Garden right there on Sue Mandy. Yeah.
Wow.
There.
Dude, life is crazy. And that's probably a bad question. We're all impressionable when we're young. That's a stupid question. But yeah, I mean, I imagine if you go to 10 different schools, you're going to learn a very particular set of skills.
Hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, you have to build rapport pretty quickly because if you feel like you're going to, I mean, you don't have time to waste.
Right.
But I would also imagine, did it make it difficult to like want to get to know people?
Only the first day or so, maybe, as I was navigating life through new schools, or just in general. I guess I always, through my dad's ability to be more of a performer when he's in public, he's always having fun cutting up. I observed that in life. And so he showed me an example of, man, it's not that big of a deal. Just have fun in life. And so I take the approach of just having fun. But when I moved here, I ended up meeting my now wife at that Olive Garden. And I was just enamored by her, man. I was just like, man, who is this chick, right? Like, I was working as a host there. She comes walking through the door, and I'm like, man, I have got to know her, right? And so she was coming in to get an interview, got the job, and I obsessively communicated with her as much as I could until we started dating after 8 months of that, of me chasing. But in between all of that, when I was getting to know her, I ended up getting to know some of her mom's friends and family, and they introduced me to a guy who was just always happy, and I couldn't understand why he smiled so much, right? Because I didn't come from the background of smiling a lot. I came from the background of you look hard, or that's it.
Yeah.
Right. You don't open up your soul. You just sit there and just be stern in life, because life may have beaten you up. But I always wanted to figure out why that guy was smiling so much. And so she introduced me to him. I got to learn more about who he was. We sat down for coffee, and I was just in awe of his results in life. And so I didn't want to be like him. I wanted to think like him, because I was trying to become a better person anyways at that point. I had met a girl or a woman, and I wanted to make sure that I could be the best for her. And so he was that to his wife, what I wanted to be to my future wife. He was just a great, supporter of the family. He was just a great guy, right? And so he started to recommend books to me as I was asking him, hey man, what's your journey? How did you get to where you're at? And it always starts with asking a question. Is how it really starts in life. When change is about to happen, it has to start with a question. But I had to ask him, man, what were you doing to help you get from one mindset to another? He said, well, I just started to read these books. I recommend you read Magic Thinking Big. So I started to read that one. And he said, now it's time for you to read Personality Plus, which is by Florence Littauer. That book talks about the 4 different personality temperaments, same stuff that Aristotle was using, phlegmatic, which is more reserved, melancholy, which is more detailed, choleric, which are heart chargers, and then you have phlegmatic, myself, reserved, are phlegmatic, choleric, melancholy, and sanguine. Sanguines are the fly by the seat of the pants, always the light of the party. But anyways, that's Personality Plus. So he started recommending all these books, and me, I was a high school dropout. I was not interested in it at all. But if I wanted to change in life, I had to change the things that I was reading in life, what I was listening to, who I was listening to, and what I was watching. And I think I'm going through this progress of my life because this is just going to be it's just going to be one of the first explanations of how I have come from where I was. And I think the question is that you asked was, do you think it was difficult to meet people? I didn't really think about it, but now looking back on it, yeah, I guess it was. I was really self-absorbed at the time. But now I love meeting people because everybody has an amazing story to tell. And that's why I appreciate this podcast and what you're doing, because everyone's got a beautiful story and we all need to tell that story and hopefully learn from it. And it's not difficult to meet people anymore. Let's just say that. Because I know where my vision's at, and my whole hope is to figure out where theirs is and see where we can connect and make progress together.
Yeah. So would you say like kind of one of those changes with meeting people? So like before, like before, like it was kind of like you didn't really necessarily care to connect, and then now it's just much more important to actually like get to know a person and connect with them.
Absolutely. Why not? Every man is superior to me in some way, and that I find of him. I don't know if that's Lincoln or not. I wish we had someone to tell us like who the quote was.
Sure. I'll Google it. I'll Google it.
I got a little bit of a right one went out. There you go.
Yeah, you can keep talking. Mine. Can you hear out your right ear?
Yeah, I can now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anyways,
let's look that up.
I think it's important that we get outside of ourselves and connect with people, because we all need a team to win in life, and we're all supposed to be a team in the human race.
Dude, humans are amazing.
Yes.
And
I'm happy I'm one.
that was kind of one of my things, kind of why I started the podcast, what we were talking about. I had a big issue with like wanting to actually like connect with people, and being able to sit down and have a conversation like this with somebody, and just actually taking the time to genuinely be interested in somebody and like what their story is, because like you said, we all have a story.
Right.
I think that connection is just so important.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, the people that we surround ourselves with,
Mm-hmm.
the things that we read, the things that we watch. Our diet is more than like just what we eat. It's everything that we consume. It's what we're listening to. It's what we're watching. It's what we're reading. It's what you look at every day, not necessarily just on a screen, but like your environment, your overall environment. So everything that you're taking in is a part of your diet. So, I often talk to people, dude, and they'll ask me if I saw something. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, like, because I don't watch the news anymore.
Sure.
I get my news through people because it's all bad shit on there anyway. None of it's usually very useful.
Why filter through what their perception is of what's happening? You can just focus on where you're headed, because ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, I can't do anything about Kim Kardashian kissing whoever or whatever. I can't do anything about it. But I can make sure that my planner and my calendar is filled up to progress.
Yeah. Hey, can you move your mic up just a tad?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right.
Yeah. All good.
I forget that you edit all of it, don't you?
All this talking we're doing right now, I'm not going to edit any of this out.
Oh.
Hey, bro, this is all the podcast.
This is raw and uncut.
Yeah, dude. Look, all that, it's all recording. We're all just going, hey man, this is all good. This is all good. But what we're saying is still, it all stands though. I mean, everything that we take in is our diet, and
right.
You can't take in that negativity. So I'll just let some people filter that shit for me, and then if I need to hear about it, somebody will probably tell me about it.
Right.
It's
all fear-based. You don't want to necessarily have your life consumed with fear because you'll act in that way. And so they say false evidence appearing real. I believe that. Yeah, there is some fear and some animal instinct of us to, it's something that we've been given to protect our bodies, fear in a sense. But I much rather act on the path of action than fear, because action conquers fear.
Absolutely. So we've had conversations before, you and I, about the law of attraction, and I'm a firm believer in the energy that we put out is the energy that's returned. But you have to put in the fucking work.
Yeah.
Period.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, belief is very important. You know what I mean? It's necessary. And like you said, it all starts in the mind. Like, you have to train the mind first. And you have to truly believe and know that what you're doing today will pay off. It's just you have to put in the work.
Right.
It's that simple.
Just like when I leave here today, I have another appointment, and I'm going to take out my cell phone, just like everybody else. I'm going to put into my Google Maps my GPS coordinates, 111 anywhere street.
Yeah.
And then it's going to route instructions to that goal. And so that's how I look at life. We can sit and say namaste and chill and do nothing, which is cool. I love meditation. But I also know that in order to succeed in life, you definitely have to have a concrete goal, and there will always be a route to the goal. The plans change. Sometimes there's a detour.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with the GPS analogy. Global positioning system for a reason.
It's a good one. Yeah, dude, you have to be able to pivot.
Right.
Do you have a vision board?
Yes, I do. Yep, absolutely. I have a vision board, and then I have a goal board. There's a difference. So some would say that goals are the one thing that you need, but there's a game plan to the goal too. There's a difference between goal setting and game planning. So my goal setting would be taking a bunch of magazines of things that I like, cutting it up, putting it on a black poster board, and putting it above my bed. Shout out to my wife for that. She's awesome. She put it, because every time you wake up, you look up at your dreams. And so
that's a good move.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's my goal board, my dream board, all the things that I want in life, and services I want to provide to people. And then I have my my game plan board, which is a whiteboard of what plans I'm making to get to that goal.
Yeah.
Because we can dream all day long, and that's just what it will just be. It's dreaming. But until we act towards it, it's not going to come to fruition. I love the law of attraction, like you said, but it's also about how much work I'm going to put in to make it happen, like you said. So
yeah. I mean, having like I said, I mean, just to repeat, having belief will only take you so far. You got to put in that work.
Right.
So when you got here and you found your mentor, and what were your next steps into kind of where you are today, right? So let's just do just a quick recap. So high school dropout, you fucking in and out of jail, just bouncing around where you live in, jobs, different things, no real sturdy foundation, no real structure, essentially going nowhere. Right. But you seem to at least have the wherewithal to not be stuck in the cycle so much that whenever your dad did reach out to you, you realize it's time to get the fuck out and move somewhere else, start anew if you can, right? So you did that. You got up here, found a mentor, you met your now wife, then girlfriend. Where's your life headed at that point? You found a new circle of friends, right? So the people around you, very important.
Right.
So where's all that taking you?
Right. So once I found a fantastic mentor, he was reading books and recommending books, like I said earlier, And at the time, all I knew for work was working physically with my hands to make an income because I was a host at a popular restaurant chain.
Trading time for money.
Right. So I was trading time for money, and perfect time to segue into it. Uh, he then recommended that I read, The Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki, where he talks about there's 4 different ways to earn income in this country. And Robert Kiyosaki is a fantastic author. I love listening to some of his stuff now, for sure. And he says in his book, The Cash Flow Quadrant, that there's 4 ways to make money: employee, self-employed, business owner, or investor. Now, Robert has very great knowledge, and I trust his judgment when it comes to financial advising. I don't have to agree 100% with what he says, but he's right on the main point of the cash flow quadrant. But he wrote the book Rich Dad Poor Dad as well. So it's a follow-up to Rich Dad Poor Dad. And so Robert says that as an E or an S, employer or self-employed, I physically have to trade my time for money. You can never have both as an employed or self-employed individual. And then also he says in both of those quadrants, you pay the most taxes compared to the guys on the other side of the quadrant. So employed or self-employed, trading your time physically for money, it's impossible to have both.
You can't scale that.
It's you can't scale it because it requires your physical being. And then what was really more alarming was, I got it. I have to go make money. I get it, Robert, right? And so what really got me was that he said that 95% of the people actually live and operate on that side of the quadrant, and 5% are on the other side. I was like, well, what's this other side?
Yeah.
I want to be part of the 5% because I
100%.
thought growing up, let's go see what the other side of the tracks are looking like, the other half. It's not the other half. It's only 5% of the people over there doing it.
Oh, yeah.
So
Small.
he says then that the B quadrant is business system owner, and the I are investors. And the investors come from the B quadrant typically. So when we take all of our hard-earned income and we go pay out to other businesses, pay out to these businesses who we need to provide us with furniture or need us to keep the lights on, we're taking our hard-earned money and giving it to those guys on that side of the quadrant, the system owners. And so I wanted to figure out how to be a system owner once he recommended that book to me, because at 95% of trading our time for money, that's a lot of people. We're only getting 5% of the money, though. On the other side, you're getting 95% of the wealth. So I'm not that good at math, but I'm not that bad either. So I really was beginning to become passionate about the right side of the quadrant because it required a lot of my time up front, but in the back end, I get my time back before I reach retirement age. I wanted to have time over money. And that is where my journey began with business, because of that mentor saying, hey, you need to read this book, because he could have told me all that, but with being an egotistical human being, I would have been like, take it at face value. But when I'm reading the words myself, I'm putting it into my psyche, I can actually then absorb it as, oh, I need to take the right steps and do this. And so that book ended up firing up my entrepreneurial spirit. And in that, in order to graduate to the right side of the quadrant, you have to develop yourself. You can't be an entrepreneur and you're just playing. And you're not doing any development. It requires progress for success. And I got tricked into becoming successful because at the end of it all, why would I want to read this book, mentor? So that you can get further than where you're at. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And it's made all the difference in the world because the journey has been more important than the actual end goal. You asked me, poster board, you have a vision board? Absolutely, sure do. But when you look back at the game plan board to get to that vision board, there's a lot more game planning going on than the actual visions.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, the vision is just one piece of it, right? That's big picture. That's far off, right? You gotta have a plan, right? You gotta work the plan.
Right.
Paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
It's usually a commonly understood term, but fuck, man, if you just sit there and you're constantly planning without doing work, there are a lot of people. And this is something that I've come to realize, there are a lot of people who, I mean, they're not necessarily the best at anything or the smartest or anything like that. It's just they just do the fucking work.
Right. You just do the work. If you're passionate enough, you'll do it. You know, motivation is a very elusive thing. You can watch YouTube videos on it all day, and you know what I've learned is that motivation is never really there when you need it. When I'm sitting on my couch and I'm lounging in for the night, I can watch 1,000 motivation videos, but I'm not gonna get up and do nothing because I'm gonna go to sleep.
Yeah.
Because that's where my mind's headed, is to sleep. And so motivation is something that comes from totally within. There's some great ideas that you can get from books and videos, but it really comes from what we really want. And for me, I only finally discovered it once I started to just read more about economics and microeconomics to start getting yourself into a good financial situation, and then studying the macroeconomics. Why is 2% interest rates going up? Like studying that stuff, I wouldn't have never wanted to do in high school.
Yeah.
But I do it now because I'm ultimately chasing freedom and I want to help other people find freedom too. Because the financial systems are a matrix, the institutions are a matrix. And I love that this is a platform to break down a lot of that. We're the modern day Neos and and Morpheuses, right? So,
Yeah, man. Well, especially me having grown up here in Missouri my whole life, and the Midwest in general, and you can easily take this down all the way through the South. It's very conservative, right? And there's in particular here in the Bible Belt, there's a very set way of thinking, and there's a lot of everything's pretty uniform in the sense of like there aren't too many outliers. You know what I mean? Like there's it's heavily Christian. Most people hold a certain set of beliefs and different things. And one of the things growing up that you're always taught is you go to school, you graduate, you get your degree,
right,
and then you get a good job, and then
mhm,
it's like, and then now you have this 9 to 5,
right,
and you know what I mean. And then so in particular here in Missouri, very blue collar, in a lot of ways,
mhm,
as far as what people do is it's you go to work every day, you work hard, and you come home, you take care of your family,
mhm,
right? So it's like you kind of like it's just all about just like putting your head down and doing the work, which is a very good quality. But then you plug it into the system that you've been taught your whole life. Oh, you do this, you do this, you do this, and like this is the path to success, and this is how you're supposed to live.
mhm,
And it's like sure that is a way, and it's something that's been done for a really long time, but that model is very, one, it's out of date now,
mhm,
and two, like it's not the only way to do things. You know what I mean? Like there's so many ways to make it happen in life,
right.
and just the idea of you have to do this and then this and then this and then this is just how life is supposed to be is just so fucking crazy to me.
Yeah, there's no real cookie cutter way to this life. I had dropped out of high school, not to praise it or anything. I did it because I didn't learn in that fashion, and it was really rough for me to get along in that environment. I was in and out of school anyways, being suspended. I always challenged the teachers and such, and I just really was a rebel in all aspects when it comes to that specific system. So I was an outlier, like you said. And what I'm noticing now in history of finance right now, most of the outliers from then are the most successful people today.
Right, just kind of
and mhm,
blazing their own trail. You know what I
right.
mean? Like
Hmm.
you just realize that it doesn't have to be this way.
Hmm.
And in society may tell you like, dude, you're a fucking loser.
Hmm.
Like, what do you mean you dropped out of high school? Like,
Hmm.
you can't do anything in life. I'm sure some people tell you can't do anything in life. And I even had that thought. You told me you dropped out of high school. I'm like, damn, dude, you can at least finish high school. Like,
Hmm.
just that one little piece of paper.
Yeah.
Like, that was my initial like judgment reaction. But then I'm just like, hold on, let's take a step back, right? Like, let's not be an asshole and so judgmental. Like, you're a great person. Like you're well rounded. Like you educate yourself, right? You're working hard to like build the life that you want to live because you realize, like you said, like this system, this matrix, like you don't have to live this life. Like you can do it another way, and then now you're trying to help others along the way. You know what I mean? So like you're proof that this isn't the only, like, this whatever path over here isn't the only way, right? And,
All right.
and there's a lot of people like that, you know what I mean? And not say everybody has to travel that path, but
I think we're all like that if we are given the right circumstance, not right circumstances. Don't misconstrue that. The right information through time. So prior to 17, I had, like I said earlier, just one set of thinking because I was given this from the environment that I was in. But I, for whatever reason, wanted to consistently move forward. I told myself that I was going to be a multimillionaire when I was like 14 years old, right?
yeah.
I was telling myself that over and over again. Now, I don't know where that drive came from, but obviously at the time, it was, money was the motivator, but it's not now. It's just a byproduct of serving, right? But changing everything in terms of my thought processes came down to nonstop developing. Like once you get into personal development, it can get addicting, because you haven't. My natural instinct is to go towards the negative, but when I'm having something positive, always changing and always going into my mind, man, things change. And the system, when I was 17, I dropped out of, like you said, most people would say, oh man, a loser, or whatever the case may be. And I'm going to be honest, from 17 to 21, I absolutely was. 22, whatever. Yep, totally was. But during that process, there's no regrets because it was a reason I was going through a lot of that stuff so that I'll know both ends of the spectrum, I guess. I'm not saying go out there and go get in trouble to figure out what real life is about, but I knew that from reading those books that I was given, everything was going to change, and I continuously do that, and I will always recommend books and audios for people to listen to. I started going to networking events around that time. This is stuff you can do for free, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, there's so many things you can do.
Right. There's a lot of people who want to give their information out, and you just have to network and connect with people as much as possible. That is how I got over a lot of that negativity, is constantly reinforcing the people I was around, the things I was listening to, and the things that I was watching.
Right.
And I hope that people who are listening in today can get some of that, because wherever you want to go, you can totally get there. It's just a matter of nonstop looking at it. Like that vision board you're talking about, that's important. I teach on Tuesday nights leadership, entrepreneurship, and business principles and such, right?
Oh, cool.
In Collinsville, Illinois. In that, I'm consistently talking about what the vision is. So when NASCAR drivers are taught to drive, or in their teaching realm, apprenticing, they are taught to look at the infield if they're going out in a wreck. Because if you're spinning out, you're looking at the wall, you're going to go to the wall. But if you're spinning out, you have a better chance of going on the infield if you're looking at the infield. Mm-hmm. So if that's true for NASCAR drivers, well, why wouldn't it be true for us? If I'm looking at the circumstances, the wall, if I'm looking at that, I'm going to get more of that. But if I'm looking at the infield, the green grass, pasture, my dream, I'll go closer to that. You can never get away from the evil thoughts and the inner demon, so to speak, or the negative thoughts. Can't get away from that. You just got to blast more positive and different change, because this world is binary. It's either hot or cold, man. So hopefully that makes a little sense.
Yeah, no. I totally understand what you're saying, because you can extrapolate that to even just like life circumstances in general, in the sense of, if you're focusing on doing and doing good, like bad things happen in life, right? They're going, it's inevitable.
Yeah, right.
Life is hard, bad things happen, right?
Right.
But if you put in the work, eventually so much good happens that it weighs out the bad. The bad things that happen, like they don't derail you. It's just like a speed bump, if anything. You know
Right.
what I mean? And that's the same thing with your thoughts, right? It's like you just got to feed the positive, right? Just feed the positives. Like we all have negative thoughts. Like I can't tell you how many times to where, you know, and any person who, you know, who is like trying to make it on their own, trying to build the life that they want to live. And, you know, some days you fucking wake up and it's extreme anxiety and stress. It's just like, holy shit. Like maybe I should go get a fucking job.
Hey.
But like you have those thoughts, but you can't live in that space, right? You know, it's just, it's acknowledge those. Okay, cool. Like I had that thought. Now keep it moving, right? And the best way that I've found is just like we said over and over, like taking action, like building that positive momentum, like, and especially like you said, like you don't always want to do it.
Nope.
You know what I mean? Motivation is shit. Like you have to have discipline. You know, you got to put structure in your life and just be fucking regimented. You know what I mean? Like and just like make things happen, right? Like whether you want to or not, it doesn't matter how you feel. You just got to put in the work. So like you have to put systems in place in your life. Like you said, like you wake up, you see like your vision, like where you're working towards, and you see your goal board, right? Like you see these things first thing when you wake up. Like you got to put little systems in place. Like I on my phone, I took off all my notifications. The only notification I get on my phone now is like on the lock screen. Like I'll see if I see a text or something, because I definitely need to like see that information. But all those red bubbles, gone. So like now I have to like structure and like schedule. Like all right, well from like I don't know. I haven't put in the times yet, but I'm thinking from like 9 to 11, like I'll allow myself to like be on like to work social and like check emails and different things. And then I'll chunk off like another like 2 hours in the evening. I don't know, like 6 to 8 or something.
Right, right.
And then like, so you have to start like putting these systems in place, right? So that way you're living life efficiently
Right.
and, you know, you're working towards where you want to go. I had another fucking point. I lost it.
Oh,
Damn.
that's all right, brother.
Damn.
We're talking about breaking down old paradigms, just like when it comes to working out. You're breaking down those muscle tissue and you're ripping it apart, and you're hoping that it grows back stronger tomorrow.
Well, that's just recovery. You got to recover to make that
Your
happen.
branch chain amino acids and all that.
Yeah, if you want the advanced supplementation, man, I was going strong there too, man. We're talking about success, and then we were talking about
putting systems in place. You know, maybe from 9 to 11 doing this, or more of a disciplined.
Yeah, no, I shouldn't have went down that path, because that's where it fucked me up. So we're talking about putting systems into place to make your life easier, so you can be successful.
Honestly, man, that's the perfect segue, because some of the listeners probably said he explained the left side of the quadrant, he didn't explain the right side of the quadrant. For Robert Kiyosaki's book, the right side of the quadrant is putting systems in place. Systems. That's it. When systems are in place in your life, whether it's financial systems, you know, health and wellness systems, life gets a lot easier because you start to have your time in control again. You can control your time. When I'm not having to necessarily labor for someone, say if you make a big enough residual income, some people only need $600 a week or whatever it is. If you can make that much residual income by leveraging the internet, go with that, because then you get your time back to go invest into your family or invest into the places you want to travel. Because, man, if you take out a piece of paper, anybody take out a piece of paper, and what you'll do is if you draw a circle in that piece of paper, and then you put 8 hours it's like a pie chart. In that 8 hours, we have 24 hours though, right? But 8 of it or 10 of it's devoted to producing a piece of paper to pay reoccurring expenses. Well, if you had that 10 hours back in your day, what would that look like? I think that's most people's first vision they should have in life. I know that's a hard thing to say, but I think that if we could think, what would our days look like if we had 24 hours a day, every day, if we got 10 hours back of our 24 hours, like got rid of the trade time for money job for 8-9 hours. I say 10 hours because you got to get ready, you got to drive there. It takes about 10 hours out of your
It
day.
does take longer than 8 because most people are there for at least 9 hours, right? If you
Right.
start adding in the lunch and then, like, say, commute and getting ready, like,
Right.
your day is not yours way before you get to work.
Right. So from 8 to 5, you grind it out physically, but maybe from 6 to 10, you're building something of your own that will last and that will give you your time back eventually, because the only security in life is opportunity. And if we look at life that way, I think that anything's possible. You see, I love talking about entrepreneurship and leadership because it does create freedom in a sense. When you are just all time freedom, not having to worry about someone else's input into your life, I think you can get so much more out of life. And that anxiety and depression might go away because you're free again. You're
Yeah.
actually free. Do you remember when you were 10 years old and it was summertime?
Dude, you just did whatever you wanted. Every day was today. That's
Mm.
how I like to live life now. Every day is just today.
Now, I'm going to take a step back. Some may say, oh, that's just being lazy if you got your time back. Well, if I had all the money in the world, I wouldn't retire. That's not how I'm thinking of it. When I ask people when would be a good time for you to retire? He's like, man, most people are like, takes a maybe even I'm 60 or 70. That'd be great to retire, but I would never retire. If I had the money now and I didn't have to have a job, I wouldn't retire. Yeah, you would. Retirement isn't a matter of sitting around and doing nothing. When you're not working for someone else, you get to do and travel and do what you want, man. But you can also keep a structure for your finances too, to make
Yeah.
sure you're not, because there's ways to make money on these devices, man. If you're in bed all day, just at least look to be making money somehow in a residual way. But there's all types of ways to do that. I think I'm going down this rabbit hole because I love freedom. I think freedom's really cool,
Yeah.
because that anxiety and depression that I used to have in life came from the struggle of dealing with other people's emotions in a building, or
Yeah.
dealing with other people's I don't know, other people's issues in a workplace. I didn't operate well. Once again, I proved that in high school. At 17, I dropped out. Hey, I can't do this structured stuff. I'm the worst.
Hmm.
And so I dropped out. And for me in the workforce, it was the same way. It was like high school again.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of is, man. And that's a lot of what they're trying to breed with a lot of these schools, just factory workers. It's just
Right.
this old structure and it's all kind of bullshit to a degree.
Right.
But on that same note, you still have to put structures in life, right,
Yes.
to be successful, which a couple different things. So I did remember my thought earlier, with the structures in place, right? Because you're not always going to have that momentum, especially like being here in Missouri, where like it's winter right now, and like seasonal depression is like real. I couldn't imagine living somewhere where it's always fucking cloudy because like me during the winter months, dude, like I don't want to do fucking anything, bro.
Sure.
Like it's such a struggle to like really want to do anything. Like I don't want to be like around people, even like
Hmm.
so like that's I mean I know what that's from. It's like I'm not it's less vitamin D, right? Like there's less sunlight, there's less like outside. So like I'm trying to make those points. Like yesterday I stood outside and like just in the sun because it was like a nice clear sunny day. I was like,
Right.
fuck,
Right.
dude, I gotta soak this up. So you're not always gonna feel this way, right? So you have to fucking put in those systems into place so that way you're taking daily action, right? And like I like to use the power list, which I got from Andy Frisella, which is just put 5 critical tasks that you want to get done every day. You know what I mean? Like at first he kind of explained it. I like to say get all fucking 5 done. Like you can get all 5 of those done before noon. You just won the fucking day, right? So and then now you have your time back, right? So I say that because putting something in place like that helps you build momentum, right? You start checking like things off the list. Boom. All right. Now you start building momentum. Now you start feeling good. It's not because you're motivated. It's because you have discipline, and now you feel good because you got something accomplished, right?
Yeah.
And you start
Endorphins.
building that momentum, right? And that takes you into the next step, which will eventually lead you where you're going, right? So ultimately, you do have your time back because it's super important to like control your time, right? I think for me, that's what it's all about. Like building the life that I want to live is just all about just doing what I want to do. And I think a lot of people, if they're trying to figure out, well, what is your overall goal or like where do you want to be or like I think a good question to ask yourself is like, what's the perfect day like? You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
money not being an object, build your fucking perfect day. What do you want to do, right?
Right.
And that's an ultimate like exercise of like money being no object, like you completely controlling your time. Like, what would you do? You know what I mean? If you do have the finances, you know what I mean? Like, don't even worry about those restraints. Just figure out like what you want to do.
That's one of my favorite questions to ask people in general. Anyone who knows me knows that when I connect with someone, I typically in the first 10 minutes of knowing them ask them, if time and money were not an issue, what would you do? And I have to ask it a couple times because they're not asked that question ever. I've had a lot of situations where people say, "Well, I never thought of that," because we've been so in the thick of things of having someone else dictate our time. Having the thought of having all your time to yourself, it can be scary, or it can be that's pretty fired up.
Yeah.
So that's one of the very first questions I love to ask people because, like I said, I think to get rid of that and let's not do anything because every day is cold outside. I think once we figure out, wow, I know where I'm headed, that's more important because I can go back to the GPS situation. If I've got to be from here to Kansas City and I don't know the place, like I'm going to put in my GPS exactly where to go. I don't care if there's a snowstorm or if there's something going on. If I have to be there, I have to be there. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if they have 10 detours on 70 West. It doesn't matter if there's a hurricane somehow in the middle of the U.S. or tornado systems happening. If I is a requirement, let's just say if I had a kid and my kid was in Kansas City and they needed to be rescued, right?
You're going to find a way.
You're going to find a way.
Yeah.
Whether you're tired or not, you're going to get up. You're going to find a way to get there. And so let's not use the circumstances in our lives to dictate our actions any longer because the circumstances are false illusions. We've all been dealt a hand, a card, our card deck. We all have been, dealt cards, but it's just how we play those cards each day that we're given. So temporary, like I said, to go back earlier, motivation on YouTube is great, but it's only temporary. It's there for in the moment I'm fired up, but you need something bigger than that to propel you to Kansas City to go get your kid who needs to be rescued.
Right.
So, yeah, man, it's fun stuff.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, man. Yeah, you gotta fucking put in the work. It's so important.
Right.
And
Right.
damn it, I lost my other. I lost it.
That's okay, man.
Oh, it was all. I think I hit most of the points that I wanted to say,
Right.
but there was this one other thing. We were talking about momentum, building a lifetime. Oh, I know what it was. Use the word. I think it's just. You say a lot of people have the issue with like the word retirement. I think it's just semantics, because. So for me, and I think it's the flip side of that coin is like work. Like the word work, like there's a very negative connotation to that. Like for me, as soon as I wake up, I'm working. You know what I mean? Like until I wake up, till I go to bed. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times when people think about work, they associate work with like I go to this place and I do this thing and I have to be at this like desk for like 8 hours or whatever the case may be. Like from this time, like that's work to them. You know what I mean? They see you on your phone or they see you on your computer and they don't. Well, they can understand the computer, but they see you on your phone. They see you on Instagram. They don't understand like, no, this is work too. You know what I mean? Like. So
that's a great point.
So work isn't necessarily where you're at.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Or necessarily, whether or not I'm putting this widget on or I'm doing this task on, in this part of the assembly line. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily, there's a lot of different ways to do work. Work can be going to dinner and meeting with some potential clients or going, just going to a mixer. You know what I mean? Just being of service in some sort of way, you know what I mean? Just connecting with people, like it's still work in the grand scheme of things. But when you're living that life and you're doing that, none of it's work.
Because you're not thinking about the task of
Exactly.
having to do something to collect something.
Exactly. You know what I mean? It's just all a part of like your day and what you're doing. You're like, this is just what I do. You know what I mean? It's not work. So you can label it as work. I'm working. This is all working towards this bigger picture, right? But most people don't associate it with that. So when you say now you're retired, most people associate retirement with now I'm not doing work. I'm not doing anything,
Right.
right? I stopped doing everything. So for me, it's like semantically, so most people understand. Like I don't think I would personally say like I'm retired, because I don't think I'll ever retire by that definition.
Hmm.
It's always I'm always working. I think I'll always be working towards something. You know
Right.
what I mean? I think the focus may change, and there'll be different things throughout life.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? But I feel like I'm always going to be working towards something. You
Right.
have to be, right? Because otherwise you're just stagnant. You're not growing. You're not learning. So you're not living out your purpose. So your purpose may change throughout life,
Hmm.
but I just think it's semantics that people get hung up on, right? So when you say that you're you want to retire,
Hmm.
so you don't want to do anything anymore, and I don't think that's necessarily what you think, right? Because I would I would guess that you would say like you're still gonna be working towards your mission, right? You're still gonna
Right.
be doing stuff.
Right. Absolutely. I have mentors who don't have a normal, 9 to 5 or anything like that, but they're the hardest working people I know.
Exactly.
Right. They're completely time free. They just have more mindset responsibilities than those who may not be time free just yet. So, yet is a powerful word. I think that what I love about personal development and leadership and stuff is that there's just so many great examples in history that we could learn from to help propel us forward. It's incredible. The reason why I'll always bring a book or reference a book with every place that I go is because the secrets of success are hidden in books. They're not really secrets at all.
No.
But then also an application too. You can read and be educated all day. You can be a Barnes and Noble CEO, but it's just a matter of nonstop going towards your attainment, or whatever your purpose may be. And so this is an exciting platform, man. I'm so ecstatic about the internet and how we can all use it to communicate and hopefully win together at a faster rate than what we would do alone. And I absolutely love where opportunity is in this country right now. I did want to talk a little bit about macroeconomics, if that's all right.
Dude, let's talk about it.
So in 1913, we all get it. The Federal Reserve was instituted, and it's not federal, and it has no reserves. Okay.
Yeah, it is not federal for the folks listening. It's called the Federal Reserve, but it's a private entity.
Right. It's
Right?
a privately owned entity. Oh, I dropped coffee, brother.
It's all right, dude. It's all
Okay,
good.
at least, yeah, it works out.
We're fine.
Okay. We'll clean her up.
We'll
I have good cleaning solution for that.
That's totally fine. So I'm gonna grab a towel. You explain
Yep.
to the folks about the private
Okay.
reserve. I'll be right back.
Yes. Sorry, crowd. Actually, I dropped some coffee because I'm fired up. So the Federal Reserve was instituted, and it's not federal, and it has zero reserves. And so what ended up happening is very special stuff. I would recommend watching Mike Maloney's information. Man, he's just such a great author and a communicator of what's coming down the pipe for economics. And so check out Mike Maloney on YouTube, great guy for finances. But what happened with the Federal Reserve that it created fractional reserve banking? Look that up and see what that is. Long story short, we're all paying back this Federal Reserve with our debt dollars. And my whole mission in life is to at least be one of the people who are explaining how to get out of the economic matrix, and most importantly, how to do it with a community of people. And here's why. We don't need to consistently keep paying these people with our hard-earned tax dollars. When you go into business for yourself, what happens is you get a lot of tax breaks. Now, when you're doing your 9 to 5 job, please, at the end of the night, look at ways of creating a business online or just creating some sort of low overhead company for yourself and your family. And that way, if something does go crazy, you actually own something. You can't be laid off from your own thing. You pay less taxes as a business owner. There is a lot of freedom once you get some of the financial stuff out of the way. I don't focus a lot on money to accumulate it in the moment, so to speak. I really focus on how can I keep most of what I have to pay out anyways. look, if I have to pay the electric bill every month, you better believe I'm going to figure out a way. Well, how do I get in on the cut of a discount, or how do I get in on the distribution of that electricity? Because all goods and services go through a distribution channel. And the more we can tap into that distribution channel as independent entrepreneurs or business owners, the more money we can get back. The richest man in the world is Jeff Bezos. He's the richest man in the world because of distribution. All the money is in the distribution of goods and services. I think that it's important for us to figure out how to capture that together, pay less on the stuff, or get paid from companies, sponsored by companies for doing awesome platforms like this. I say all that to say this. I really hope that people get out of this conversation the importance of figuring out the economics of their macro or their microeconomics. Figure that part out, because there's a lot of freedom in that. I had a lot of fear and anxiety in life because I was really trying to figure out, how am I going to get my next meal? And the fact that I thought about how I was going to get my next meal over and over and over again, it was more difficult to get my next meal because I was focused on the negative part of it. Instead of saying to myself, man, how do I free my mind? Or how do I get to Maui in 10 years as opposed to my certain circumstances now? I really want people to be able to free themselves of this economic thing, because it's made all the difference in my life. I'm not 1,000% free yet, but my mentors are. And by listening to them, find a good mentor, please. By listening to them, applying what they're teaching me, our family will be set for generation to generation. I really hope people study the financial reserves and the Federal Reserve and study that stuff, that history. Study the 1920s, the Depression and Prohibition. Study the 15 years after Prohibition, because here in Missouri we just went through a after Prohibition type of thing with Amendment 2 being passed.
Yeah, medical marijuana being passed in Missouri.
Absolutely.
That's fucking awesome.
Absolutely. And so learn from history, like Prohibition, to figure out, how can I capitalize on this new industry that's happening. Like, I adore entrepreneurship and business ownership because the country's set up for business owners. It's not set up for employees. When I worked as an employee, my job was to do a task to make money, but the first thing that came out of my check was taxes, which I didn't see. So taxes that went to the company that I work for, so they can pay their taxes and make interest on my taxes that I'm giving to them, by the way. So they make an income. So I figured out through the cash flow quadrant and reading up on Robert Kiyosaki stuff that, holy crap, man, I've been scammed. I didn't get taught this in school. I'm going to learn more about this now. So if anything, I'm not here to promote who I am. I'm just here to spread a message of there's a little bit of hope, a little bit of motivation, some fun, but I really hope the listener and the viewer will start focusing more on where they want to take their family's life. And hopefully it's a good purpose wrapped around it too. So I hope some of that stuff makes sense. I can go all day, man, but I'm not gonna. Well, I want to keep being redundant here, but it's just binary, I guess.
Well, it's important to for people to understand that the life that you want to live is obtainable, and the information is available. Like, all of the information is available through books, through podcasts, through certain documentaries, or just different things. So it's all available if you vet your sources, to make sure that it's credible and different things.
Right.
But like all platforms like podcasting is amazing, and I'm still shocked about how many people don't know about it, which is still actually very cool because there's so many people you can still teach about it. But at least in the health and fitness realm, the most up-to-date current information is basically all coming through podcasts. Why? Because it's all like the scientists and actual researchers and people doing the work, presenting their findings and information in real time, essentially. You know what I mean? So these authors who are writing books, they're going on podcasts now, and they're talking in depth about their views in the book and different things. So it's just an excellent resource. And your local library, like, oh my gosh, they have everything new things as well.
Right.
And it's all for free. You know what I mean? You're already
Right.
paying taxes,
Right.
which comes to another point. As a small business owner, like, yeah, there's a lot of tax breaks, but on that same note, depending on who's in office and different things, it can also be rough for a small business owner because it kind of pisses me off because I feel like everything, like, we taxed dollars. You know what I mean? Which fucking kills me. So yeah, and I think it's important to kind of learn the system that you're operating in. Not to
That's
kind of
that's
it
a key
is.
point right
It's
there.
important to learn the system that you're operating in because money isn't everything. It's not the most important thing in the world, but it's pretty fucking important. Well, I guess money isn't everything, but it is fucking important. Let's just say that.
Sure. Well, when you think about our expenses, I mean, at on average, maybe all of our expenses, uh, I'm going to say maybe 1,800 to 2 grand a month in terms of average American household, maybe. Uh, Whatever your expenses are, let's just go with that. What if there was something running in the background covering all those expenses? And then what? Would you then still go to work? you know?
Yeah,
And so,
we're kind of headed there
right,
with automation, right?
right. And
Yeah.
it's just so many opportunities out there. And I think there's just a tsunami happening and coming when it comes to what's happening in the big economic scheme of things. There's a lot of great economists to study and read up on and all that. But I think that instead of us really watching the news and pointing fingers at others, maybe like Stephen Covey says in Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, start with your end in mind or the end in mind,
Yeah.
and then fight to make sure that you build your own boat when the tsunami comes. Because, man, get out of debt, do what you can to be a business owner on the internet. I'm a strong proponent of the internet because there's barely any overhead. But overhead is where I'm living. Like.
Yeah, yeah. The barrier to entry into business these days
Mhm,
with the internet and
mhm.
phones, I mean, it's fucking search. There is none.
Right.
You can start an LLC for, depending on your state,
Mhm.
anywhere from, I don't know, like 50 to a couple
Sure.
hundred
If you
bucks,
want to
something
do it
like
on
that.
your own, absolutely. Or there's credible sources to help you put it together legally, however you want to do. But
It's cheap.
right,
You can do it.
right, you can absolutely. And I think that all of us focusing on freedom together, we can get out of whatever the situation is that's happening. There's a lot of stuff happening in the world, but I know one thing is that until we're affecting our immediate circle of influence, the massive circle of influence will never change. You
Yeah.
know, I like focusing on micro and macro. And that's why my company name is Cosm Direct. So that's the macrocosm and the microcosm of information, product services direct to you. Now there's no website for that just yet. It's just something that we just started to do 2 years ago or so, where our whole goal is to travel around and spread a message of leadership, hope, and that's what we need, I think, big time. Just like in your health journey, man. I can't wait to hear the story of how that happened, your health journey. But I'm really just interested in everyone's journey, and I think that we all should really hope to, help each other and serve each other. And I love being on this podcast today for sure. I can't wait to hopefully come back with some prepared material. But it's been fun, man. This has been fun.
Yeah, for sure, dude. For sure. Yeah, we've touched on a lot of different things, man.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
how can folks get a hold of you?
Yeah, so Mike at cosmdirect.com. So that's Mike at COSMDIRECT.com. And on there, I do speaking engagements for companies. I've done speaking engagements for insurance companies. Um, there's a multitude of things that I'd love to connect people with. And so also I'm on Instagram at mike.brownjr on Instagram. And those are some of the ways that I can be reached or followed. And so, yeah, there's a lot of information I wish I can go through tonight, but
Dude,
but
yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
it's just that yeah, there's a
we,
lot of stuff,
we
but
can sit here and talk all day. We'll have to
right,
have you back on for
right,
sure,
right.
man,
It's a lot.
because, I mean, we talked a lot about it, but
Hmm.
I would just say, the money piece is just one of the pieces of the
Right.
puzzle to life.
Right.
It's important to figure that out,
Right.
and I feel like once you figure that out, you can start to build out the rest of your life. A lot of times, that's why you see so many people who have all the money in the world. They're just so fucking unhappy
Hmm.
because money really isn't everything. It's just one piece, but it's an important piece. So,
Hmm.
building the life that you want is,
Hmm.
it's a fucking it's an art, if you will.
You're exactly right. I didn't know much about building the life I wanted until, like I said, I started to change up some stuff. But
So,
one of my favorite one of my favorite books is a parable, and the book is called The Ant and the Elephant. And so that book talks about it's Ant and the, Ant and the Elephant is by Vince Passetti as the author, and in that book it's a parable where the ant would be the equivalent to our conscious mind, where our conscious mind takes 2,000 neurons to produce an action or a thought. So of my 2,000 neurons, I'm walking around, or if I'm taking a shower, I'm driving. That's me focused in with my 2,000 neurons. But he then says that the elephant in the story is our subconscious mind, which produces 4 billion neurons. So growing up, I put all my effort that I had into my ant mind, and I had no idea about my elephant mind at all. I didn't know that everything that I was absorbing would eventually be my reality 10 years from now. Now, 10 years ago or 11 years ago, I started on this journey of personal development and reading books like that. And once I figured out that what this book really meant was engaging my subconscious as often as possible with the dreams and images of the things that I want to do. And the people who know the most about the 4 billion neurons versus the 2,000 neurons, which is a huge gap, by the way, huge gap. The ones who know the most about that are the advertisers and the television CNN folks who are trying to tell your elephant where to move your ant. You know, that's not something that we should really be absorbing anymore. I think we should really focus on our elephant mind. Go walk through $1 million homes if that's what you desire to have, or go serve in a community of elderly folks where they're just happy to see someone. Go look in the eyes of those guys. Focus on your elephant mind more than the ant mind, and then you can take the ant anywhere you want. That's
oh
what I
yeah,
want to share.
brother, I love it. Well, dude, we'll end on that, man. Cool. All right, everybody. Until next time.
Till next time, folks.